What do you love about being outside and active?
I'm sure I've spent more time outdoors than in. That just feels like home.
Enjoy what you can do, because you never know what is around the corner.
Just being outdoors in the fresh air, it just clears my mind.
Fully immersed in nature is what brings me the most joy.
Hello and welcome back to the first episode of the Outside and Active podcast in 2024, which features a man who has been running every single day for almost 30 years. And alongside this momentous running effort, he has also written a book on fell running. So if you're looking for inspiration in January, then this is the podcast for you. One day, nearly 30 years ago, John made one decision, and that was to run every single day, no matter what obstacles are put in front of him. Come rain, shine, Christmas or injury, John gets out and runs. Nearly 30 years later, John says that running is just like walking for him. And in this episode, he tells me a bit more about the motivation that started this challenge. Also in this episode, John talks about his book, Lakeland Fell Running for Mortals, which is aimed at park runners and club runners who mainly focus on the roads but would like to run in the hills as well. And finally, John talks about his upcoming book, something you can find out more about in this episode. The link to John's book, Lakeland Fell Running for Mortals, is in this podcast description, so please do check it out after you've listened. And I'm kicking off 2024 by asking you for a quick favour. Please do share this episode with someone who you think would enjoy it just as much as you. Thank you very much, and let's head straight into this episode with John Myatt. John, thank you very much for joining me on the Outside and Active podcast. It's great to have you, and I'm looking forward to having a really interesting conversation about your relationship with running and how that's transpired from being a hobby to now something that's kind of part of your career and more than a hobby. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before that, we have an opening tradition on this podcast, and that is where I offer you a piece of advice that someone who's been a guest on the podcast previously has left. So your piece of advice comes from a lovely woman called Caitlin Limmer. And to give you a bit of context around her, she's now a runner and a race director, and she organises her own run club as well. But back in 2004, she was given 40 minutes to live. Her husband was told that she had 40 minutes to live, had a miraculous turnaround, complications during birth, miraculous turnaround, and is now kind of still fighting on. And her piece of advice for you is to learn from her experience. Don't wait until your final 40 minutes to make the changes you need to make in life, which is quite hard hitting.
It is really, yeah. I mean, I think I haven't waited. The trouble is, you don't know when your final 40 minutes are going to be, do you?
Very true.
So yeah, that's kind of the issue for everybody to remember. I think it could be tomorrow, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's important that people realise that live for today. Really, that's the message, isn't it? In that one.
Completely, and that's exactly what she was talking about with that. So that's the piece of advice. And the other thing that I also asked to every single guest is, what do you love about being outside and active?
It's difficult to know where to start, because what don't I love about being outdoor and active? I think all the research nowadays points to the fact that people are happier when they're outside. And certainly I feel my happiest when I'm outside. I live in Cumbria, and I've lived in the Lake District for years, and wherever I've lived in the world, I've found places to get outside and run, mountains, green places, deserts even, and it doesn't matter where you are. That feeling of space, I think, is it just means that you can expand yourself. You don't feel confined by the walls around you. The light is crucial to the way that you feel, and it's just your well-being is elevated by being in a natural environment, as natural as you can make it. I mean, it can be a park, it could be a strip of grass by the side of your house, but as long as you're outside, you just feel better. And the active side of it, I can't sit down. I don't know if anybody else is like me. I have restless leg syndrome. I twitch all the time. I feel like I have to be moving. And that the feeling of the activity side of it, the feeling of being able to move, and I don't know. I've always been interested in physiology, and my background is I have a PhD in biochemistry. My background has been in physiology in the human body, and I've always been interested in how the body works, and how the body really is designed to be a running machine. There's been lots of books written on that and the evolution of the human body. We are meant to move, and we're meant to move not necessarily quickly, but for a long period of time. We're endurance species designed to, chase our food down all day if necessary.
Yeah.
And so I think if you are outside and active, you're in tune with your evolution. You're in tune with natural selection. You're in tune with the history of humanity, really. And so for me, that's why outdoor and active is important.
It's clear to see your passion for that completely. That comes through when you're talking about it. Has it always been that way? Has, particularly running, but being athletic and sporty and health and fitness always been part of your life?
No, not at all. I'm going back a bit now. I used to play, when I was at school, I used to play football. The school I went to, that's all you played. I think the PE teacher tried to make us do a couple of games of cricket in the summer, but we just, after half an hour, we just left and took a ball and went to play football. And I love that. I love the athletic side of it. I love the running around, and I love the feeling of you forget yourself for a while, don't you, when you're active. And I love that side of it. But I went through a period of doing, I suppose, absolutely nothing. I got bogged down in my studies at university. I just never really felt, I never felt like an athlete. I think really the problem is I've never had a talent for any kind of coordinated sports at all. I can't catch. Football I was absolutely hopeless at. And so I never had any particular skills. And I think that put me off. And I discovered running in, I think it must have been 1981, 1982. So going back a long time. And I was, I wouldn't say I was depressed, but I was really, really down. I had a bad time of it. Various things had gone wrong in my life, and I was struggling mentally. I think these days it would have been recognised a lot more than it was then. Nobody talked about it then. It was just, well, he just stays in all the time, and he's a bit down. And a friend of mine said, "Why don't you go out?" I think it was like the first running kind of boom during the kind of late 70s, early 80s, when marathon running started to take off. And he said to me, "Why don't you go out for a run? You might feel better." And I just looked at him. I thought, "You must be joking." And a few days later, I did, and I of course didn't have any running shoes or whatever. I just had a pair of old Dunlop Green Flash trainers, and I must have found some shorts somewhere. It was the middle of winter. I was living in Manchester. It was freezing cold. I went for a run, and I thought I was going to die. And as most people do.
Some people still think that, even if they've been running for years.
Yeah, I know. Well, you shouldn't do. And I'd been inactive for 5 or 6 years. And it was, but the great thing about it though is that you quickly make progress from that level, and you can start to see those little achievements, and it just kind of developed from there over the years. And a few months later, I did my first race, which was foolishly a marathon on very little training, and I got hooked on that, and I suppose just became not an obsessive runner, but I just became I suppose addicted to exercise and the feeling that exercise gives you, and it developed from there, and it grew from there, and you get to a certain point when running defines you. Running is what you are, and you become a runner. So when people describe you, they describe you as a runner. People look at me now. I was trying to think the other day where it was. Somebody said to me, "Are you a runner?" And it was just some person I hadn't met before. I said, "Yeah, I am." What makes you say that? She just said the way that you look, and I can see that now in people. You can spot runners. Not all runners, but you can spot a certain kind of runner. Kind of they look lean and a bit worn out, and so it does. After a while, it does define you, and it's become important. It became important in terms of my social life. That's what I did. I went running. I joined running clubs. and that was my way of passing time. And now it's what I am.
Well, I was going to say, I was coming on to that because you're talking about sort of the early 1980s of getting into running and finding running. And like you said, a lot of people be able to relate to the idea of becoming a runner, whatever that is. But then you get to, 1994, and there's a bit of well, I put it in your words, but a change in your relationship to running where it becomes more of a constant, let's say.
Yeah. I've always been. Do you know Ron Hill? Have you heard of Ron Hill?
Tell me more.
Well, you might. He's a legend. He's a running legend. He was. I suppose he was running in the 1970s predominantly. He's probably still got one of the fastest marathon times, male marathon times for a British runner. He was one of the first British runners to go under 2:10 for a marathon, and his big thing. Well, he was famous for running every day, and he has the world record for street running, and it was over 52 years. And
wow.
He was born near Manchester. I think it was Accrington, so near Manchester, and he used to run all over the place. He used to do a lot of running in that area, and I'm from Manchester. And Ron Hill was just a kind of a famous figure during the 1960s, 70s, 80s. And his big thing was running every day, and he set world records and everything. And I kind of dabbled with that for a while. I thought, I can see there's something in this running everyday business. He ran twice a day. He was completely bonkers. But what shifted me over to it was I was living overseas at the time. I was living in Hong Kong, and I used to get home from work. I was a teacher. I used to get home from work, and like everybody, I had really good intentions of going out for a run. I'm going to do some exercise, and I had a race planned, and I had a schedule. And you know what it's like? You get home, and you've had a hard day, or what you think is a hard day, and you put the kettle on, and you have something to eat, and the thoughts of going for a run just seem to dissipate as soon as you sit down. And I just got fed up with that kind of procrastination. Should I go for a run or shouldn't I go for a run? And it just got on my nerves. I used to go about 5 times a week, and I used to spend quite a number of, I suppose, minutes or even hours in that week thinking about whether I was going to go for a run rather than actually just going for a run. And it just kind of got on my nerves. And I remember being in a hotel room in Kuala Lumpur, and I hadn't been for a run that day, and I was flying back to Hong Kong. And I thought, well, I didn't even know what time it was. It was probably about 5 o'clock in the morning. I thought, if I don't go for a run now, I'm not going to go for a run today, because I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going to have a couple of beers, and I'm going to get back, and I'm not going to feel like running. And I thought to myself, well, why don't you just make the decision to run every day and have done with it? And then you've made that decision, you've made it once, and you don't have to make it again. And that was it. I decided, it was 1st of April, 1994, I'm going to run every day for the rest of my life. And I've never had to make that decision again.
There's a slight funniness in it being April 1st as well, April Fool's Day. I quite like.
And, it wasn't planned. I just when I look back, I thought, why was it April the 1st? There's a kind of irony in that, isn't it? Yeah, but that's the way it was.
So that time in Kuala Lumpur has kicked off a tradition. I say a kind of something that you stick to every single day, and it's coming up to 30 years of running every day. And of course, I imagine people listening will have questions completely about that, and I'm going to try and tackle a few of them. The first one, you've answered why, to make sure that you take that question that you have every other day or every day out. You just have you've done it once. You've made that decision. I'm going to run every day. One of the more logistical questions is, how far are you running? How long are you running for? Does it change, or is it consistent?
It changes. If you follow the International Running Streak organization in the States, they set a minimum of a mile, which I think's pretty poor.
Yeah,
really.
That's just,
if you think about that, I think I'm not kind of dissing it too much, but I think a mile is fairly straightforward. I have tried over the 30 years to do a minimum of 4 miles. each day. I have dipped under that with situations of kind of fairly severe injuries.
Yeah, I can
That'd be a
imagine.
real sort of. But these days, I used to average probably around 60 miles a week, and going up more than that when I was training for events like ultra marathons and so forth. These days, I tend to average around 40 miles a week, and so I'll do some longer ones and I'll do some shorter ones, and it's kind of difficult really because it depends on where you live and the type of running you do. So I can, if you go out and do a really hard 5K, it's just as kind of exhilarating and just as good for you and just as rewarding as going out and maybe running more slowly for an hour and a half. So I suppose that actual distance thing doesn't really matter. And also where I live now, surrounded by mountains, if I go out, I can go out for an hour and I've probably only covered maybe 4 or 5 miles because I'm doing a lot of climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas years ago, I would be doing that distance within 30 minutes. So the whole thing in terms of time, intensity, distance, it kind of varies. But I tend to think of 4 miles as being my kind of bottom line, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing some quick maths in terms of looking here and going, okay, say you said 40 miles a week, 60 miles a week, averaging 50 miles a week. That's looking at sort of 2,600 miles a year, just over 4,000 kilometers, sort of 4,200 kilometers, which is a long way. I mean,
have been around the world 3 times in those 30 years.
Is that what it is?
That's around that. Yeah, compared with a lot of runners who ultra runners, it's not probably that they may not run every day, but they're running kind of longer distances. But yeah, I've been around the equator probably about 3 times.
Wow.
So it is a long way, and the other thing that I've not really counted is how high I've gone.
Oh, true.
Away from the Earth. If you add up all all the ascents, I don't know how. Probably not high, but I may be in space now.
There's some great quiz questions in there, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And to use a running analogy, there's going to be some hurdles in the way of achieving this and continuing.
Well, it's funny you should use hurdles, isn't it? Because I've got in front of me a book I'm trying to get finished off, which is called How to Run Every Day for the Rest of Your Life, and in that I've got 40 hurdles, which I've called them hurdles, to get over, if you like, and 40 hurdles that I've had to cope with over those 30 years. So I'm glad you used the word hurdles. It's exactly the word that I've used.
Well, obviously that book's in writing at the moment, and people have to dive in and read specifics of those 40. But just to cover a couple, I mean, there's going to be a split here of mental and also physical hurdles that you're going to be taking. You mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. The injury is something that if anyone has been running for a significant period of time, they know that no matter what distance or what speed, injuries will become a factor and you'll have to take some time out. For you, that's not really something that you can do.
Yeah. No, I suppose, it depends on how you define time out. So I think that because I've been running for so long and my body's so used to running, running is almost like walking, if you like. It doesn't. Going for a run is like probably somebody who doesn't run going for a stroll. And so if I don't go fast, if I decide to do a slow run or a shot, I can manage that with most injuries. Well, with all the injuries I've had. But I've had some tricky ones that I have suffered. Would I recommend that other people do it? I don't think it does me any harm. I don't think it slows down recovery, and it probably in some cases speeds it up.
What's an example? Because you're really thinking knees, ankles, things like that, back, maybe
no,
hips.
I think for me the worst one, the ones that still make me grimace, I think hamstring tears, grade 2 hamstring tears. and they're really painful to run with. They're a real struggle.
Because you're not meant to.
No, you're not meant to. I think I suppose I try and envisage what it's like on the inside of the muscle that I've torn, and it's a bit like kind of a superficial scar on your skin. And so what you're trying to do really is it kind of welds together. And what you want to do is, when you're running, is not to pull it apart again. So if you can imagine some kind of cut on your skin that has kind of healed, what you don't want to do is to move it too much so that it actually ruptures again. So you're kind of managing it all the time. You learn to manage it, but the pain is painful. It is painful, but I think keeping the blood flowing. I mean, what you're doing, you're flushing out the toxins. You're delivering, kind of the nutrients and the amino acids and everything that you need to rebuild the tissue. And you're doing that. If you're running, you're kind of helping it, and you're bringing in hormones and so forth. So I think you're actually probably not harming the recovery process as long as you manage it, and that's what you have to do. And
I think you're quite right what you said before. Your body adapts to what you're doing, and I think what else will have to adapt is not only your life to what your this let's call it a challenge is, but the people around you, family and friends, because to run every day, you're running at Christmas, New Year's, birthdays, events, things like that, holidays. How do you sort of manage that in? I suppose after a period of time that becomes more like second nature now, but maybe towards the beginning of this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good really, because people, after a while, people know that you are going to go for a run. And it's not like, if you got a busy day and if you kind of got a family life and you got children around, very often people will frown upon you. I'm going for a run now. You look after the family. I'm going for a run now. But if they know that you run every day, they've kind of built into it. They bought into it with you, because they know you're going to do it. And one of the great things is finding ways of doing it when it's fairly difficult to do so.
And a kind of fresh nature to it, as almost kind of
does,
like,
challenge. It's a challenge. So I did that, when the children have grown up and gone now, but I used to do a lot of taking them to, kind of activities. And instead of waiting around or coming home, I would go for a run while they were there. Or I often run places to meet people. So I don't get in the car, I run. And, you can, there's loads and loads of ways of saving time. Loads of ways of being efficient, and you get up early before anybody else is up, and you go for a run then. And so there's always a way. People always say, one question is a funny question they ask me when I say I'll run every day. And when you say that to people, they don't really take it in. They think, oh, he runs every day. What does he mean? And then when you explain to them, well, actually, I do run every day. And they say, well, even on Christmas Day. And I'm always surprised at that question. Christmas Day is the easiest day to run. No, you're not. Most people aren't at work. So why is that difficult? You're off. You're on holiday.
That's a good point.
That's an easy day. I mean, you should ask me about when I was working kind of full time as a kind of a school administrator, and I had loads and loads and loads of planning to do. Yeah. How did I run then? That was when it was hard, not Christmas Day. It's funny how people think about it, really.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of the physical and logistical issues and hurdles that we've spoken about. But obviously, before we start moving on to the books, is there's the mental side of this? I mean, like we've said, it becomes something that's normal and part of your everyday. But is this something that is like waking up and brushing your teeth? Or are there days that you do wake up in the morning and go, oh, if this is tough?
I think the toughest are when you're injured. If you have an injury, or if you're ill is difficult. Illnesses. I mean, I'm fairly lucky. I have been fairly lucky. I managed to avoid COVID until middle of this year, in July, and I caught COVID, and I thought, oh, this is just going to be, a bit like flu or whatever, and something I can run through. But it was pretty bad. I wasn't kind of close to being hospitalised or anything like that. But it was a real struggle, and it was hard. It's hard to get out of bed. If you got an illness that probably means that you're going to stay in bed for 3 or 4 days, it's hard in that day to get up and motivate yourself to go out. And I think the way I do that is to think, well, it's not that hard, really, is it? I mean, you just got to get up, and you always feel better once you've done it. I've never been for a run. I mean, I think this is what I always say no matter how much you don't want to run, you always feel better for having run.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
100%. No, I've never met anybody who disagrees with that. And so, the old saying is, the first step is the hardest. It is. It's stepping out of that door. Once you've crossed that threshold and you start, you're fine. And you got to hold that in your mind all the time in terms of motivation. You got to say to yourself, well, I'm going to feel better at the end of this than I do at the start.
There's a few words there that strike me that people, I think, be interested to hear your general views on is discipline, motivation, and accountability. They're 3 things that really strike me that you have to be able to. Like your situation is taking it to the extreme of running every day. But those people that, we're getting towards January, it's dark outside, it's cold, that motivation, that discipline, I think is really important. Where does that have to come from?
I think I think once you've made a decision that you're going to run every day, or cycle every day, or walk every day, or swim every day, once you've made that decision, you're then looking for ways to do it. It's not, should I do it? Am I going to do it? So it becomes a different challenge. And I think when it's kind of looking for those, almost putting yourself into those situations where you're having like a micro adventure, because it might be dark, it might be the worse the weather is, almost the better it is, because you feel a greater sense of achievement at the end of it, and it's fun when you're out in it. I mean,
I agree.
Honestly, when the weather's really bad, you look at it and you should say to yourself, "Wow, look at that! It looks awful. I'm going to go out in that." And that's the way it is, isn't it? Really, because it's the type of thing that you remember. It's about people like generating, creating memories and so forth. If it's bad outside, then you almost feel better. Not only at the end of it, but while you're doing it, it's more fun. Bring on the rain, bring on the wind, bring on the snow, because that makes it into more of an adventure.
I love that mindset.
It stops you being too comfortable, doesn't it? I think there's too much comfort around, really. You want to get rid of that.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. I like that. I like that. You touched on the book that's in writing in front of you that's upcoming, but I'd also love to chat about and ask you about the Lakeland Fell Running for Mortals.
Yeah.
Why did you write this book specifically?
Because a number of reasons, really. Because of where I lived. I live in the Lake District, and it coincided with COVID and lockdowns, and you could see from where I lived, I could see more and more people wanting to get out into open spaces and get onto the fells, and a lot of people didn't know really where to start in that, and I know that sometimes kind of running in the mountains can seem quite intimidating. Where I live, there's a kind of a group of there are the fell runners. There is a kind of a tribe of fell runners who are kind of almost like mountain goats, and people look upon those as like a different species and don't believe that they can be like them. So these people can go out onto the fells and go running, and they can be there for hours and so forth. They seem to know where to go instinctively, and a lot of your average runners, your park runners, and the club I'm a member of is called Eden Runners, and they're based in Penrith, which is a town rather than being a village in the lakes. And a lot of people, I could tell, really wanted to get into the mountain, to get onto the fells, and it's quite hard to know where to start. It's making those first steps again. So what I wanted to do was just to produce a number of runs that were fairly low key in terms of fell running. So they would be take people between an hour and 1.5 hours to complete. They'd be relatively safe because you're not going very far. You're sticking close to roads and so forth. And I would be describing routes in enough detail to allow people to feel safe, and just giving people routes that they can feel confident on and comfortable with. And within the book as well, I've got several runs that I would call entry-level runs. So low fells, easy to, relatively, it's all relative, isn't it? Relatively easy to run.
Yeah.
And these things are not meant to be major kind of challenges and epic events. They're just ways in which people can get onto the fells and enjoy the fells as much as they knew that they wanted to, and somehow in some ways didn't really know how to do it.
Just taking a step back slightly, because a lot of people that have been running for years will or may know what fell running is or what a fell is.
Yeah.
But for those that are maybe new to it or haven't heard of this before, what is a fell and what is fell running?
A fell is Norwegian for mountain. And so that's it. I mean, it's still used today. I think we would spell it FJELL, a fell. It's just a mountain. So it's mountain running really. But the concept behind it, I mean, a lot of people maybe do trail runs these days. But the concept behind it is that you've the land that you've got in, say, national parks and a lot of other places is open access land. So after the Right to Roam Act, I think it was in 2004, I might be wrong with the dates, you are allowed on the open access land to go anywhere. You don't have to stick to paths. And so fell running really is running that doesn't necessarily go over paths. It can do, and they do lots of fell races organised by the Fell Running Association do go over, do stick to trails and things like that, but you don't have to. So once you're through the fell gate, once you're onto the open access land, you can kind of run anywhere, and that really, I suppose, sets it apart from mountain running that you might do in a trail race, where you are on a marked course on a bridle way and you're following a kind of a set route. So in a fell race, you have a checkpoint at the top of the fell, and you get there
however which way,
you get back how you want, and there might be some guidance into the finish line with tapes or whatever, but basically there's no set route. And I suppose that's the kind of the essence behind fell running.
Because most people will get into running if they think, right, okay, new year, or I've seen a friend doing it, get into running. They're going to start with park run, or they're going to start with road running, obviously depending on geography, because they might think it's safer, it's easier in navigation, and just I'm going to get into it. What are the main differences? Like, is it more difficult, or actually can it be another pathway into running for people?
It is another pathway into running for people. I think that it becomes difficult if people lose their way. I suppose if you got a safe route, and by a safe route, I think I mean one, or for me it means one that no matter where you went from that route, you'd be fairly quickly down to a road or a settlement. So you're not going to be like some places you might be in Scotland or whatever, where you could be miles and miles away from anywhere, and you could easily get lost. I think if you're doing a fairly short run, close to kind of roads and close to villages, you're going to be okay. And it's not dangerous. The biggest issue is, the weather always, isn't it? I mean, and you have got to watch that. You've got to be a little bit more wary about that, and you've got to take the gear to cover yourself for that. But it's no hard in terms of the actual running. It's no harder. And if you've got hills, you just go more slowly. That's all.
And I suppose one of the other things is that if I've got my brand new insert brand name here, road running shoes, they're probably not going to be the most adapt for, so that certain clothing elements and preparing for the elements themselves, I suppose, is important.
Yeah, and in my book and in other books on trail and fell running, there are sections which describe exactly that, what you need to go out onto the fells. It's different. You do need more gear, and you do need to carry more stuff just in case you have to walk and it's cold. And yeah, I mean, and your shoes are going to be different. I mean, trail and fell shoes, you can often pick them up for lower prices than road shoes. Yeah. And you know, you're better off having a range of shoes. Really, I think it's better for your joints to have a range of shoes. And you know, the great thing for me about running on fells, on mountains, soft surfaces. You know, it's kind of the impacts are lower, and it feels better. And also, you're not suffering the same gait all the time. The worst for me, the worst kind of running is if you live in a town and it's flat, because everything you do is identical, isn't it?
Yeah, same pressure points and same things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got the same forces, exactly the same points in all your joints. Whereas if you're running outside on the fells, it's a complete mixture. You're twisting. You are kind of you're moving up and down. It doesn't put the same force on the joints constantly. And also it's good for your balance. It's good for your core. You've got all kinds of advantages to it. I think I think it does take a little bit of time to maybe build up strength in things like your ankles. People might twist ankles and things like that, which you wouldn't do on the road, perhaps. So there are different kind of issues, but what I'm trying to do is kind of get rid of that, the kind of the myth surrounding it, really.
Yeah, that barrier to entry, because I suppose with the book, you're appealing to at least three audiences: people that haven't run before and want to get into running. This is another avenue. You're appealing to people that maybe have started running, that are, like I said, road runners or park runners, and you're appealing to people that also are fell runners, or particularly go out on that in that type of running, but want to try something different or want to learn more and find new places to go.
Or you're going to a new location on holiday, and you haven't got time to do the research yourself, so somebody's done it for you, and you got places to go, and so just make it easier. I mean, I suppose I just want people to run. And I never say this, but I never kind of try and encourage people. I never say, oh, you should, because I think it can put people off. But I try just through examples and giving people, kind of guidance. I just want them to get outside and enjoy running. Really, that's all. That's what I want people to do, because it's given me so much. And it is so enjoyable to be out. The freedom is just so enjoyable. You can't whack it, no matter what the day's like, whether it's a beautiful day in summer or a foul day in winter. You can't beat that feeling of running. And it can be on the streets for me. You can have a good run on the streets. You can mix it up a bit, and running on the fells gives you more variety. It gives you more another kind of set of places to go, environments, new scenery, and so forth, a new way of running. So it gives you that. It mixes it up a bit for you and stops you getting stale. Makes it less boring.
This might be a tough one for you to answer, but there's over 70 of these routes and locations. Is there one that's close to your heart? It's quite hard. It's quite hard to say that, because it varies so much. I mean, I suppose there's a certain near Ullswater, there is a group of fells which Askham Fells, Usker Scar. And I love that because it's kind of rolling hills. I think it's because of my age. There's a few like that. I'm getting to a point now where I like the rolling hills more than the really steep inclines. And so the ones by Ullswater, those rolling fells, and there's an absolutely superb descent. There's kind of over a mile down a fell on a runnable kind of gradient, so you can break your mile record for that one if you want to. roll down it.
All downhill. No, I mean they're all, yeah, there isn't just what, it varies. It
Yeah.
varies.
You've outlined one of them, and like I said, there's so many of them in the book. Where can people go to find out more and explore through the book?
Well, where can they buy the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon. I mean, I suppose unfortunately, for your local independent shops, and it's in all the shops in the Lake District. It's in Waterstones as well. Not all of them. I think it was in Newcastle. I think it was in the Northern Waterstones. Certainly in Carlisle. But unfortunately, the cheapest option is
Amazon.
Amazon. They undercut everybody.
Yeah.
And
especially for accessibility. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get it the next day, can't you?
Well, that link, like I said, if you're around the Lake District and you fancy picking up a book, then it's in those locations. But I will also put the link to the book, the Amazon link, in the podcast description as well.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much. You've offered a lot of advice, and also it's very interesting hearing about your relationship with running and how it became what it is today of running every single day. There's only one thing I need from you left, and at the beginning of the podcast I offered you a piece of advice from Caitlin. Now is your opportunity to leave a piece of advice for not only the listeners but for someone coming onto the podcast as a guest in the near future.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to advise people to run every day, but unless you really want to. But I think the advice really is to set yourself kind of targets. So it could be, I am going to run. This is just kind of practical advice, really, in terms of how to maintain an active life, and it's kind of setting yourself targets. So I am not necessarily going to run every day, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something active every day, and it could be running, it could be cycling, it could be weights, it could be a spin class, or my goal is I'm going to do five days in a week. I'm going to do something. So it's about staying active, and don't be put off by anything around you. Just do it, and don't be put off by your age as well, because this is something that you want to do, not just today, but for the rest of your life.
That's great. I look forward to passing that along. John, thank you so much.
Right, thanks, Tom. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the first episode of the Outside and Active podcast in 2024, featuring my guest, John Myatt. John, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast and telling us about your books and also the incredible running streak that you've been doing for almost 30 years. I hope that you listening found some inspiration from that and can work it into whatever your New Year's resolutions or aims are. We'll be back with another episode of the podcast. And like I said at the beginning, please do share this with anyone, a family member, a friend, a colleague who you think would enjoy it or value from it just as much as you have. I'll be back very soon. And until that time, enjoy the outdoors.